How to speak freely in America. Well, we all know that we have the freedom of speech. We have the right to bear arms. We also have 3 and 4, which talks about military personnel staying with individuals during times of chaos or whatever. And we have a lot of other laws, but that's just in the Constitution, right? Underneath, well, I guess Bill of Rights or amendments, one of those things. I'll let you guys figure it out. You guys are very intelligent, and you have AI now, and you've seen the Matrix. The birth of AI was the downfall of man. So let's get into it. So how do you speak freely in America? Let's first get this through. If you guys don't know me by now, my name is Michael Guerrero. I used to be a Marine, and when I was running my own section, I had a blonde mentee that like to have fun. Now, granted, there's a phrase that blondes like to have fun. She had a mouth on her. And I love this woman to death. I treat her like my daughter, etc. Her child calls me grandpa. It's a long story. But because I knew that she was underneath my care and charge, I had to show her how to play in the gray. So I said, Thayer, come over here. I said, look, you are now a representation and reflection of me and my leadership capability. And before you get in trouble trying to figure out how I'm able to say certain things in certain environments, and you try to do the same thing without knowing, I want you to understand this is a reason why in a courtroom you need an attorney present to speak on your behalf, because sometimes you may not know what you're saying, and the attorney or lawyer is able to well educate the judge and the other people presiding within the room as to the situation at hand, utilizing different jargon. So I want you to read all the punitive articles, and then I'm going to show you how to dance and play without breaking any of them. So the first thing, obviously, is to understand the rules of the game. Words, music, media, movies, TV shows, YouTube, books, magazines, paper and journals, so on and so forth, right? These are all expressions and everything else that's covered well underneath freedom of speech. So once you understand these things, you start to realize that there are no rules once you understand these things, right? Because yes, the rules apply to those that do not understand and know them, but do they apply to those that do understand and know them? Possibly not, or at least it may appear that way and look like an illusion. See, I had someone that tried to mess with a friend of mine, right? And a buddy of mine named Shane, we're not going to talk about him anymore, but we are going to fix certain things. Somebody was trying to mess with one of his friends, and I wanted to know whom. So I needed to study and understand what was going on because people wanted to play with certain things. And I don't take certain things very well because Shane also has certain disabilities. And when you're messing with children with disabilities, it kind of rubs me the wrong way, right? Because scientists will be scientists, children will be children, right? And being a person that likes to study and into spirituality, I almost wanted to cry out to God to send some help, so on and so forth, etc., because of all the bullshit that was happening and the misuse and abuse of power that happened, well, let's just say within the last 5 to 6 years, not just with myself, but with other individuals. And it says, in order to get into the kingdom of heaven, you must first enter with the mind of a child. Yes or yes? If not, you guys can quote me, put it in the comments, so on and so forth, etc. But if it's an analogy or a metaphor, well then, if heaven and hell are in one plane, etc., or the government is God and the government that currently presides or corporation that presides over America establish certain rules, then we need to know how to dance with those rules, right? Now, that is a metaphor, etc., a play on words for those of you that do not understand. Now, when you're speaking to someone, you need to understand whom you are speaking to because of the fact that, one, people from certain environments or that come from certain environments or industries have a limited use of vocabulary and jargon and speech, so on and so forth. This is why social media is so beneficial for those of you that are understanding psychology, marketing, and things like that. And or sales in order to, make a profit or profiteer, right? And so if you were to, and I'm quoting Gary Vaynerchuk here because that's in the public domain, um, when people are on LinkedIn, they are in a business mindset. So you want to speak to them the way you would speak to other people at a business networking event, at your business, group gathering, whatever, and it would be normal there, right? See, if you were to speak like you speak on TikTok, on LinkedIn, they might say you have a mental health issue and they'll try to cancel you or block you or say something negative because their mind hasn't been prompted with AI now. You know what a prompt is. They haven't been put into state, another way of saying prompt, in order to understand and absorb and receive this information. So you have to understand whom you're speaking to. If you're speaking to a good guy, if you're speaking to a cop, if you're speaking to law enforcement, if you're speaking to a doctor, financial person, CPA, accountant, yada yada, etc. If they speak dog, quoting Megan Thee Stallion, so on and so forth, who has a lot of wasta, Watashi Wasta, her song, so on and so forth, then you understand why I'm rambling because you already know what's going on. See, if the rules can be bent for one, can't they not be bent for others? That means we live on the premise of do as I say, not as I do, but yet aren't leaders supposed to lead by example? Think about it. Right? Now, when it comes to understanding the pathways of communication, volume plays an important role. See, if you come from New York, when somebody raises their voice, people understand that they're getting upset, frustrated, etc. It gets your attention, and it also shows, well, the intention that is going to occur. Right? If you're crying really loud or you're listening to a child cry, why are they crying? Are they sad? Did they get injured? Right? If someone is speaking to you in a certain manner, devil dogs, if you know anybody else in the military, so on and so forth, that's getting out of line, go ahead and educate them on how we communicate before, well, a lot of veterans start saying terms like, yo, let's just drop blouse because I don't care about your rank or your status or your job field right now. Squash it and then move forward. Some of the devil dogs out there will understand what drop blouse means. Anyways, and before you try to make quotes, a blouse is the top portion of a uniform. It's not a blouse that's worn by women. Okay, let's get back into it. So, volume does two things. Now, if you watch Evie Poumpouras or other people, they talk about paralinguistics, etc., and people can utilize this to their advantage, just like an attorney will utilize this to their advantage to play with one's emotions because, well, words trigger things like keywords trigger Google to put your advertisements in front of people, right? So you have to be wary and careful of whom you speak to. Remember the quote earlier that I stated that not only to enter into the kingdom of heaven, you must first think with the mind of a child, but be careful in certain rooms, for you never know that you might be sitting in the presence of an angel or angels, plural, etc. And some of those angels might be rubbing shoulders with devils and demons. Now, this is coded language because, well, angels are supposed to be good, right? And demons are supposed to be bad. Think about that for a second, right? And then, of course, you have things like Captain Planet, and a Captain Planet would say, with our powers combined. So why did I say devil dog? Well, look at our uniform. We have the navy blue jacket, right? Dress blues with the red embroidery, so on and so forth, our blood stripe, etc., the gold buttons. Sometimes we wear our dress white if somebody's getting married or whatever. But let's look at the gangs that reside within America. You have the Crips that have the blue feature. You have the Bloods, the Latin Kings. Hell, you have KKK that wears white, etc. In case you got to throw a sheet on it, you know what I'm saying. For those of you who know about the gas station sheets, let's not forget fossil fuels are the decay of the dead. Let's talk about that for a second and why people are investing in oil when they could be investing in other things, so on and so forth, and profiteering, etc. But I'm not going to touch on that right now. Let's continue with the lesson. So, as I stated earlier, If one can say something, cannot others? Well, here's the thing. In the legality of the United States, if it's in the public domain and it's said by one individual, then you can usually state that yourself. Now, I'll go ahead and bring this into a legal context for those of you who don't want to do your research. You can bring in what's known as case law. For those of you who studied or paid attention in class, you understand the difference between case law and case study. For those of you who have not, please go check it out, but I'll give you a quick breakdown. Case law is historical evidence that can be, well, put into a case in order to show a judge that a judge from the past, or there was a past ruling where a judge ruled differently on a case that is similar to the one that is being presented and presided over by the judge, and that can be, well, beneficial to whomever you're defending, and that may sway the judgment at hand. Now, if you're in business, you have a case study. Similar concept, different words. See, I worked for this guy named Marty Wells who had a PhD in computer science but couldn't fucking figure out how to utilize social media, and then got on my case because I guess shit rolls downhill and I was making him look bad. He asked me to step down, lied to the company, said I got fired. He kept his stuff, but then he showed up as an undercover police officer wanting to say stuff like, "Do you see me now?" Now, if you guys haven't seen the movie Now You See Me, you should go check it out before Now You See Me, Now You Don't comes out, because it's going to be an amazing thing. It's about magicians, similar to Hustle, where they go after people that are screwing over a bunch of people, right? They're the good guys, right? They're not going after just people that are breaking the law. No, these are the whales. These are the huge whales, as they would say in the movie Ocean's 11 or Ocean's 13, that are, well, taking people's time, energy, and freedom. Because remember, recessions only affect those that don't have the means or resources. Those with the means or resources don't feel it, and they will tell you things that, well, people that don't call themselves family have more money. But then again, I have brothers and sisters that I served with in the military, and they're a part of my family. And if you're married to one of those people, then we call each other family. And if you're married to them, well, you share your net worth with them. I think so. When you're married, because it goes both ways financially, so that you both can survive and get out into the world and do the things that you want to, because we do the things we have to so that we can do the things we want to. Yes or yes, right? You don't go to the gym, you don't train, you don't go to boot camp, buds, or any other camp, so on and so forth, to not understand how to do the job. We do what we have to so that we can do what we want to, right? And last time I checked, united we stand, divided we fall. So do you want a family that stands united, or do you want to play World of Warcraft where everybody's an individual? No, you much rather be married or be in a relationship or have friends or have a network, right? Because the same person or a person is good, but having multiple people to go to is even better. Remember, it's your network, not your net worth, that makes you not only successful, but wealthy, not rich, wealthy. So, if it's in the public domain, it is allowed to be utilized, and then it can be presented as case law if something ever comes up. If you're in business, you have case studies that are able to be presented to convince people to do business, right? Now, people do pay for aesthetics, i.e., beauty's in the eye of the beholder. So when people see something, right, their eyes flex, their pupils dilate, so on and so forth. And for those of you who are not in the marketing field or business, this is why porn is studied so heavily, because, well, if they're able to measure pupil dilation, etc., to get a genuine baseline on when you're aroused, seeing something that you enjoy, well, then they could utilize that later on down the road. Yes or yes, psychologists out there. For those of you who have studied medicine understand this, especially if you study the thalamus, the prefrontal cortex, the arteries within the heart, because you treat cardiovascular disease and things like that. So understand that everything might or might not also have a metaphor, entendre, or an analogy attached to it, right? In spiritual teachings, it talks about, well, the four rivers, and this came from a doctor that spoke at one of T.D. Jakes' sermons, and it talks about the four things, right? Well, there are two pathways. You have the atrium and the ventricles, right, within the heart, right? And then, of course, in the other video, I mentioned Heart of Stone, so I think you guys should understand this, right? Because it's protecting the heart, the individual that could get broken down emotionally, which breaks their heart, which can also cause decay, stress, and everything else in the body. And if people carry certain genetic markers within them, all you have to do is apply stress to the structure, and then the structure becomes weak. For those of you who are in engineers or into civil engineering, you understand what I'm referring to. If you were to build a bridge and not use proper structures in order to have reinforcement of weight distribution, i.e. stress put on joints, pivot points, etc., then the bridge will surely fall. So these structures need to work in unison. The structures need to be united so that the bridge can stand and people can get across or, move away. Same concept with building and architecture. If you have a weak structural architecture based upon, well, the geometry being incorrect, well, then that structure with just a little bit applied pressure will go ahead, come down crumbling, right? This brings me to, well, things like 22 a day and everything else, which will stop. For those of you that want to keep playing scientists and hoarding money away. So let's continue, because I'm now putting this in the public domain, and by the time you see this, it will already be out on YouTube, which is owned by Google. And I'm not even going to begin on that one. So if one wants to detain you because of thought or speech, then why have it in the public domain? Why have freedom of speech if you're only going to use that speech in order to try to, well, pursue, detain, because you don't like what they're saying and it's triggering you emotionally, but you forgot about your fucking oath and you don't know how to ask goddamn questions. You're just doing as you told because you need a paycheck. Read the Constitution, read the law before you break it underneath somebody else's tutelage or handling of you, or mismanagement of you, because most people can't do their fucking research. So, what is okay for one is okay for others, is it not? All for one and one for all. But if we're going to screw over one, then you might as well screw over everybody, which is happening, well, in both physical and mental health spaces of healthcare. Remember the Hippocratic Oath. Don't be a hypocrite. But then again, they lie through omission. And what is omission? If they don't ask the question specifically, they don't have to give you a specific answer. And to quote Suits and Lewis within Suits, right, when Mike Ross and all of them were competing for, I think, a pen in that part of, I think, season 1 or 2, and they asked the question about square pizza. He states that the law is a precise endeavor, and they asked the question, how many U.S. presidents graduated from Harvard? Well, somebody who thought, because they went to Harvard, thought they had the right answer, and because Lewis went to Harvard and he favored that individual, he tried to give him, the pen, etc., and the case and everything like that, which would increase the person's finances, reputation, and everything else. But then Mike Ross stepped in and he said, you're forgetting about this person. And he goes, that person didn't go here. And he goes, you're forgetting that he transferred and went there for a certain period of time, but then so on and so forth. And you, Lewis, stated that you must be precise in your answers, for as the law is a precise endeavor. So for those of you that like to prosecute, for those of you who like to sign pieces of paper for people to get away with bullshit, to try to enact certain laws without doing your research or asking fucking critical questions before you jeopardize your career along with everybody else's in the pursuit of not being actually free, you might want to start understanding why the Statue of Liberty is sitting out in water and it's called the Liberty Bell. And Navy SEALs are taught, if you want to quit, just ring the bell. Right? Because in the military, at least in the naval context, liberty is the freedom that is granted to you when you have time off. If you're in the civilian world, well, you have liberties this weekend because you are off, right? You're not working, etc. So you're able to freely express yourself outside of uniform and mingle with the crowd. Think about that. Think about it. Seriously think about it. See, the freedom of speech is covered by, well, the air, the media. And if you read the book, it meant that, well, the devil, if you want to go ahead and call Lucy that, was put in charge of Earth. And he was once, or she, was once in charge of the air. Well, what's on the air refers to what's in front of your face. What comes out of your mouth when you speak, if you were to hold your hand up in front of it, would be a breath. But is that oxygen or air? How are you confusing the terms? See, Marty, this is what I would like to call syntax, right? Or syntax. If you're a coder, you understand that. If you're in mathematics, it would be sign. And I'm pretty sure with your PhD in computer science, you'll be able to figure this out with the LLMs out there as you collect a six-figure salary, not knowing your fucking job or how to lead those under your charge, but to what? Cash in on the credit that or information that they gave to you to make yourself look good, but then put all the trash on them, discard them so that you keep your position and salary and they lose their position. Think about that before you pull something shady again. See, I was educated properly, not just through the school system and having mentors like Betty Stack, who was also the dean of the English department at UNC Charlotte and high up there, but she also was my English teacher at a fucking community college. And she was one of the first people that actually caught me, because when I was younger, I used to get caught for being lazy in class. Not being dumb, but being lazy. See, she thought I cheated on a paper and she had me write one in front of her. And from that point forward, I was no longer allowed to be lazy in her class when it came to my grammatical output, when it came to writing essays and paper. And then, of course, Dr. Walter Johnston, who was also a mentor of mine, who was a Gideon, who was a former Marine Corps Force Recon sniper, who was also a raider, for those of you in fucking MARSOC listening up, so on and so forth, that also was a chief financial officer for Lexington, Kentucky Banking, who was so trusted that the owner of the bank strapped $500 million worth of bearer bonds to his wrist with the handcuffs and then had him transport financial documents known as bearer bonds. If you don't know what that is, go ahead and look it up, across state lines, etc., to move money around discreetly. So before you try to say or do anything, everybody is being watched. And I'm going to quote a buddy of mine named Sid, who was light armored reconnaissance attached to MARSOC area back in Camp Pendleton, California, who I thought I saw in Charlotte, North Carolina, driving some blonde lady's SUV. Everyone could be found. If you don't believe it, test my theory and see how fast somebody shows up when you're going down the wrong way. Till next time, my friends, remember, if it's in the public domain, then it's accessible or accessible to all. It's also accessible to you. You just have to look for it. And if you want something, you have to be specific and precise, similar to the way people are specific and precise when they're looking for answers either from an individual or the large language models known as Google's Gemini, which has gems, and then of course ChatGPT, which has GPTs. So if you want to do any research, by all means, for purposes of speed, utilize the web feature to go ahead and have links get presented to you when you're doing your research. You could do the same thing with Google's Gemini. I think they're both free to a certain point. And then now you have leverage to defend yourself in an educated, intellectual way when it comes to going against people that are more informed. See, the average person is not unintelligent, they are just uninformed. And others are just bad actors and characters playing a game like a player. But as Big Pun says, they're not players, they just fuck a lot. Ask yourself why sex sells. Anyways, till next time, my friends. Talk to you later, and I'll see you guys on the next episode of Finding Freedom. Peace.